Keeping up with security issues across thousands of web assets without the right approach to web application security is a daunting task. Get ahead with web vulnerability scanning automation from NetSparker, a leader in dynamic and interactive application security testing known for its ease of use and accurate results. Detect a wide range of vulnerabilities in all legacy and modern web applications, address security bugs at scale by automating the confirmation process, automatically prioritize vulnerabilities, and assign actionable tickets to the right developers in their native workflows for rapid remediation. For more information on how to scale application security with ease, visit securityweekly.com/NetSparker. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's in-person event. Hear from Robert Herjavec, heads of security at the NFL, TikTok, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Security Weekly listeners save 20% on a World Pass and main conference registration by visiting securityweekly.com/ISW 2021. Also, if you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical training, they're available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. On to the security news. Mr. Joff Thayer is here with us. Joff, welcome.
Hello, it's good to be here. I have not seen everybody for a couple of 3 weeks or so. So again, and that's my bad. So it's good to be here. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, things happening at Black Hills Information Security. You're teaching.
Teaching, yeah. In fact, I'm getting ready to crank up another iteration of the C2 class, as I call it, next week, which is Jesus, what is the title of that thing? That's terrible.
Joff C2 class. You should take it because it's effing awesome. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's really what the class is called. But automating information security, no, that's the other one. Let's see, what is I seriously have had a total brain fart on that because I just call it Joff C2 class. But no, it's called Enterprise Attacker Emulation and C2 Implant Development. There it is.
Yes, that's a mouthful.
Yes.
It's a mouthful.
Enterprise Attacker Emulation and C2 Implant Development.
Man, you should make an acronym for that or something.
Yeah, well, I actually just call it EAE C2 or Joff C2 class. So
you should, you're going to have to make some flashcards to hold up during the show, so people with a QR code on it, so people can just scan it.
Oh yeah. So hey, don't be social engineered, but scan this.
And
our users will never be fooled.
Wild West Hackin' Fest is happening September 21st through the 24th with training and conference. And is my understanding that's virtual?
It just went virtual.
It is. It's just gone completely virtual, and I do. There's very, very good reasons for that. We actually had a number of people come down with COVID in South Dakota, and so I think the bike rally spiked.
Yep, Sturgis.
The COVID cases in South Dakota, and we were very, very concerned about that. So we've converted it to all virtual. I'll be teaching again Enterprise Attacker Emulation, C2 Implant Development in a this time it's going to be in a 2-day format. When we do, it was going to be hybrid live virtual, and so I do teach it in a 2-day format there, but normally we teach it in a 4-hour format. We're kind of disappointed that we had to go all virtual, but there were very, very good reasons for it, and there were significant health concerns, and so we had to make the decision. So there you go. The other thing is, I will say, just at the end of July, which is now nearly a month ago, I taught the regular expression 4-hour session again. That was absolutely phenomenally successful. Boy, that's a long word. And I'm planning on doing more of that this year. So hopefully we'll have few more rounds of that. It's a lot of fun doing the regular.
You know what's funny? The intern comes to me today. He's like, "So, I think I started editing in VI because it wasn't Nano." And he's like, "How do you exit?" I'm like, now's probably a good time for me to give you the crash course in VI. And I'm like, dude, you're gonna have to work at it. It's not just something like you take lightly and you just kind of like, you're gonna have to work at it. Not gonna lie. Come to me with questions. Here's the guide and here's the 10-minute tour of VI. And I'm like, I even only know a certain percentage of commands, and I could probably spend more time learning more stuff And it's fun. I had to actually think about what some of those commands are because they're such muscle memory. And I was also showing him how you can run, quick regular expressions in search and replace.
I mean, who doesn't want to type : dot comma dot plus 5 s slash? Right. I mean, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
It just rolls off the tongue, right?
Yeah. And off the fingers.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, if we're doing some plugs there, Sec 556, the IoT hacking course that I just finished up with my good friends, is available for registration. The alpha course in September. The beta course, meaning we're going to be in a test run. First time it's ever being taught. You get it half off.
Hot diggity.
Yeah, sans.org/sec 556. So
is the beta version a full 5-day course, or is it fewer days?
The beta version, so the current iteration is 3 days.
Nice.
Okay.
Is
it going to be longer?
That's what she. There is some discussion about making it longer into a either 5 or 6 day format. That also said, it is my understanding is that if you take the 3-day version and you wish to, if and when it gets updated to 5 or 6 days, and you wish to take it, you get an alumni rate of effectively 50% off. Meaning, you take 3 days and they added 3 days. Well, you've already had 3 days of that content. Well, great, makes for a great refresher, and you get
the new content.
The other 3 days at at the reduced rate.
New to you content.
And I just have to say, knowing Larry, it's going to be freaking awesome. So
absolutely,
I think it'll be a whole lot of fun, man. I'm sure you have worked really, really hard to get it to this place, and I'm excited for you.
And you're still teaching the wireless course as well?
Yes, absolutely. And both of those kits are some of the very limited at SANS that you get hardware to take home and practice and your attack targets and all sorts of stuff. The 556 kit, which we've referred to as the SIPT. So the wireless kit is the GIAC auditing wireless toolkit. And then for the IoT class, it is the SIPT kit. So the SANS IoT Ponage Toolkit, pronounced SIPT. SIPT. Yep. So you get a Raspberry Pi. You get a logic analyzer.
Which model Raspberry Pi?
For Raspberry Pi 4, the 2 gig version, because that's really all we need.
Sure.
SD card with custom image, a logic analyzer, a Bus Pirate version 3.6, some software-defined radio with a Hacker F1 and antenna.
And which Wi-Fi card you giving out with that class?
We're doing the Panda wireless card. The PAU 06 currently.
Is that an Atheros?
It is not. It's Realtek.
Okay.
But
obviously it supports monitor mode.
It does, and
I had to do that today.
It's not a ton of focus for the class. It's only a small part. So, but yeah, we do some.
I
Wi-Fi
do that
stuff.
today. You'd be proud of me. I hadn't done a lot of wireless stuff like that in a while, and I successfully put a card in monitor mode and got it to work with Enzyme. I will share my notes with you.
So did you use IW?
I used IW.
Sweet, because IW config.
Yes, no, it was IW was the or IP link. IP link will IP space link. Was also
so they've done
I
the same thing as they did with IF config then.
Yeah,
right?
no more IF config and IW config. It's all IP and IW now.
Right. Yeah, I'll share my notes with you for our listeners.
Sweet.
Larry and I are going to be talking about Enzyme
coming up
and I did some work on that, and I'll share my notes with you. And Larry and I are going to converge on I believe it's been scheduled. It's about a month from now. Larry and I will converge on that. So fun stuff.
Anything, Larry, in that course that you were just freaking amazed you were able to pull it off and get it in the course?
Bots? Arguably the entire hardware hacking section is freaking amazing. The fact that I also we are going to do some capture and replay attacks with software-defined radio, and like pull some of that stuff out, do the analysis. Like the tools for doing that nowadays are so much better.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I'm like going, damn it, because it's like, I want to take the course. I hope everybody listening does too. But
yeah,
I don't know if I can pull it off. I love the idea.
The software-defined radio is only going to get better as we refine the course. The hardware hacking stuff, I think, is just going to be insane. And should we turn it into a 6-day course, it's only going to get better.
But of course.
Yeah.
Maintaining labs is always tough, though, right, Larry?
Yeah, and especially when there's hardware involved with those labs. Like, we have to have an attack target, and you have to be able to buy it, and it has to be reasonably priced, and there has to be it has to be vulnerable in some way. Like, finding that attack target is hard. Because then like 6 months later, it changes. Like, in reality, what we need to do is we need to build a platform that we can attack and have it emulated or simulated, and that's almost as hard as finding something you can actually attack. Paul,
I wanted to go to my story number 23.
Good God,
Jeff,
23 stories?
Yeah, Jeff, we talked about fully homomorphic encryption.
Fully what now?
Homomorphic encryption, where the data stays only you can decrypt the data, even if you share it with someone else. That someone else or application or process can perform operations on that data and then share back with you the results in encrypted format. It's a really amazing concept. And I think the last time we talked about it, we're kind of like, we didn't truly understand maybe what some of the use cases might be. So I found a different article, my story number 23, which I thought did a much better job in the other articles that I've read than the other articles I read about describing fully homomorphic encryption. I think it put it in much easier to understand terms. Author did a great job. And also listed out the use cases. And my whole thing, like, he talks about preventative medicine, taking operations on that data to do analysis, that they don't need to necessarily see all the clear text data to derive answers, right, to share back with you. The same thing with facial recognition. That operation can be done without them really knowing what face looks like, just operating on the essentially encrypted data, from what I understand. And also voice assistants, I thought was the best example that you could probably describe to your average everyday person not in technology that doesn't understand encryption. I only understand it to a certain level, as many of our listeners know. I know my boundaries. Sometimes I overstep them, and our listeners call us out, as you should. Absolutely. Please do that. But voice assistants, right? Every time you speak, an assistant analyzes your voice. Do they really need to see or read the text, or can they perform operations on it without necessarily...
Do they need to hear your voice, or they just need to hear what your voice...
It has a signature for it.
Yeah, it has a signature for it.
Right. Yeah. So I thought that was good. I also want to say, like, the article title is "People Shouldn't Care About Privacy," and I think that the pitch is, since we have fully homomorphic encryption, we can achieve true privacy. And I'd argue that the use cases presented to me make perfect sense. But there's a lot of use cases where it's going to fall down and you need access to the clear text data in order to perform operations on it.
Based on sort of what you're just describing, Paul, Jeff, I'm going to jump in here for a quick second. Sure, I think that the fully homomorphic encryption is an amazing application for us to be properly securing biometrics for authentication, because we've talked about how long passwords have been crap for, and now passwords with two-factor is where we're at, and we're finding that two-factor is starting to not do as great a job as we really thought. Right. It's not the panacea we thought it would be, but everyone has been largely reticent to go to some sort of biometric wholeheartedly because, well, great, you get my biometric data and you steal my fingerprint. Well, yeah, let's go change my password.
Yeah, it's essentially a password that can't be changed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I'll just use this finger. This finger.
Yeah.
Right. And then what happens when that one gets leaked?
Right.
Like, yeah. I think
first world problem, right? I mean, it sucks when you run out of fingers.
Yeah. So you got to use other appendages that stick out, like your earlobes, Jeff, or your nose.
Your nose, yeah.
You see where I was good, Jeff.
So I read the article, and I agree with you. It was much more detailed. and yes, they did describe use cases, but the detailed description of illustrating homomorphic encryption by using pictures and adding to the picture so that when you eventually decrypt it, it's changed, that doesn't, in my mind, connect to the use cases. I mean, it's like completely different. It's like, okay, you're going down this path of describing all this cool stuff you can do, and then you talk about use cases that are completely different. I'm sure they get it in their minds. It's just not coming through to me. The neatest thing in the article, if you're willing to click on the link, is they've got like a, what did they call it? It's like a little 6-minute do-it-yourself AI test. They call it the 6-minute guide to end-to-end encryption. Try it out for yourself. So I guess you can upload an image and do something with it, and while it's still encrypted, it'll come back different, which again sounds really cool. The biggest takeaway I got from this article is just sort of the whole premise of with end-to-end encryption, you're cutting out the potential for a nation-state middleman, big brother, backdoor type of oversight that's still getting access to your data, which is what a lot of privacy people ultimately worry about. That part I get. I don't get but the basis of cryptography is to eliminate all the characteristics of the underlying plain text or data. So that's where I still I don't get what they're saying here in terms of being able to use it and manipulate it, other than it seems to be from I was having a conversation the other day about this with somebody. It might have been on my show. I forget. But the idea that it's all about data analytics and big data, and you still want to be able to do all that stuff you do to glean useful information for companies that want to know how to restock the shelves and what coupons to send to people. Those are the use cases that we usually hear about. So I'll keep reading. I'm talking to a mathematician that supposedly is. I asked him to explain it to me, and he's like, "Let me write a paper." And I'm still waiting.
Oh shit!
Oh no.
So once I I need to ping him. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I want to see how well he's doing, and once he shares that with me, and I absorb it and hopefully understand it, maybe we'll have him on the show to explain it sometime.
We do have goals to talk more in depth about encryption topics with subject matter experts within our own ranks, as it were, as well as others in the community that can help us. For example, I was trying to find the key that went with a certificate in SSL, and there's a very documented OpenSSL command that uses the modulus to compute that. And at a high level, I'm like, oh, okay, like I get it, and I can run these commands and use them. I'm like, I don't understand how all the math works behind that. I'm like,
right,
whoa. I need someone to explain that to me, because whoa.
But I bet Tyler and I might have worked with somebody who could probably do that.
Yeah. There's people out there that can do it. And again, these are, it was Dimitri that said, one of our listeners was like, some of it's the kind of thing you study for the test and you memorize it and you feel like you know it, but then you don't really use it down to that level on an everyday basis, and so you forget.
Yep, and that's what Google's for.
Why do you need to learn calculus when you've got a calculator? You just know which button.
Yeah. When will I ever need to use geometry? All the goddamn time.
Oh yeah,
you're building a cabin.
You're building something in your house. That's when you end up using geometry
figure out
again.
The pitch of a roof.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say pitch of a roof is the classic example. You done any solar? You're going to use geometry,
right? Or stairs. Building any kind of stairs.
Funny story about that. When I built my cabin many years ago and got ready to start doing the roof and was trying to figure out the angles to cut and everything, and I'm like, oh, it's geometry. So I get out, pad of paper, and I'm writing all this stuff down. And at some point, I said, there ain't no way. I see people, and I don't want to be disparaging to construction workers and carpenters.
Right. But they're not breaking out the pad and paper.
Yeah.
But no, they're not doing things with calculators and slide rules and everything. And I asked a friend of mine who's a carpenter. He's like, "Oh, you just need a carpenter's square.
You need a speed square. Yeah,
a triangle."
Yeah.
And he's like, pitch of a roof, 4-3, find a fourth, find a 3, line it up, draw a line, you're done. I'm like, oh, it's magic.
See, when I did mine, the little cottage shed thing that we built, like we had some weird angles and the pitch is off. And you know what I did? We had the knee wall built and we had the roof built. So I take the 2x6 and I put it on the roof and I take the square and I go zip, zip, and then I throw it off the shed and I go cut it with the saw right where those lines were. Math? Nope. I can draw a line.
Right. Nope.
It's magical.
Use your hacker skills.
Yep. Zip.
Anyway.
Speaking of using your hacker skills, there's one that I think we would be very remiss if we didn't discuss.
The Razer mouse.
Bingo! Nailed it.
So this is essentially
it works so well.
Plug in but now this requires physical access because I have to plug the mouse in. The mouse drivers automatically get loaded. Inside those mouse drivers, there's a point in the install where I can right-click and open up a PowerShell prompt in a system.
And even better, it uses Microsoft's Windows Update mechanism. You plug it in, and Windows goes, hey, you've got a new mouse. Hey, go get this from Razer.
Go get that driver.
Yep, go get that driver. Here's the install thing.
Not just the driver, but the installation program.
Is that a HID and PID ID that it calls?
Yes, it is.
That was with a user on Twitter.
Yep.
That I linked to in the show notes to give credit where credit is due, whose theory was, well, can I just use a rubber ducky?
It's not a theory.
Yes, you can.
You could use an ATT Tiny 85, which is a little USB thing that you can use for USB hidden, have it inject keystrokes, super tiny. If I remember correctly, this is what's the bad USB is based around.
And that's just because the operating system, I mean, Linux, Windows, macOS, doesn't matter.
Yep.
When you plug in a USB device, reads the
UID, the
certain
USB
fields, like the UID field.
Yep, the manufacturer and the device identifier.
And based on that, the operating system makes the determination that it's this type of device.
Yep, exactly. So the ATT Tiny 85, I was having a conversation with one of our folks, Faith, yesterday about that USB is actually not implemented in the ATT Tiny 85. It's emulated. It's all in software. And it bit bangs the speed and everything at every communication. It calculates that. And you can, with that, because it's all emulated, it's all done in software. You can be any USB device.
I got you.
Yep. And they cost about, if you buy them in quantity, like of 5, they're about $1 a piece.
Yeah. Well, and that makes perfect sense because oftentimes in Linux, what I get is the misinterpretation of what those fields are when a USB device registers, and Linux gets confused. Microsoft has done a better job because they work more closely with manufacturers, give them libraries to abide by, where that data is interpreted more reliably than it would be in an open environment like Linux, where there's a bunch of kernel developers that are writing device drivers and have to interpret that in a more open kind of, not as structured environment as you have. Well, I'm certain in macOS, right? It's probably more highly structured than in Windows, although your device support may not be as vast as it is. Like, I feel like Windows, you can plug in like virtually any USB device, and Windows is just gonna figure it out. The drivers are going to work way better. Yep. And that when we do the 617 course and all the hardware that I buy, so much of the hardware still comes with the CDs with the drivers on it. Yeah, where's the? And they're little tiny CDs. And they're like they're you put in CDs that you put it. And the only DVD drive or CD drive that I have at home is a slot load, and I'm like, nope, that breaks. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. So I have a DVD driver USB. I've got a 3.5-inch floppy drive USB. Oh, you have a reader for the 3D printed save icons? Yeah. Does yours have a tray that pops out of the CD so it can take a full size CD or a mini? What do they call the smaller size CD that comes with a lot of the things you're talking about, Larry? Mini or micro? Mini CD. Is it called a mini CD? It is. They have micros too. I'd have to plug it in to power it up. But wait, does it have a tray or does it just have a slot? See, now the big thing that I've not seen anybody talk about. This, Tyler. The big thing with this Razer vulnerability that I haven't seen anybody talk about yet is the potential and possibility to emulate things to virtual and VDI environments. Yeah, that's interesting. You can do some interesting things with pass-through
for virtual environments and using VMware tools libraries. So that's kind of been our big focus, is looking at how we can leverage some of the virtualized side of this for breakouts and or system access.
And you can automate that right-click, open PowerShell window here in software, I would imagine, right? It is in the GUI.
It's an API call, yeah.
I got you.
The software's just running under
running the
system.
API call, yeah.
Yep. And I think that maybe we have glossed over that part. By plugging in this device, Windows recognizes it as a Razer mouse. Windows Update says, hey, you've got new hardware. Go over to Razer, get this installer, and the installer runs a system. And when you're in the installer, you can basically right-click and tell it to run PowerShell here from that application, inheriting the rights of that application running a system.
Yep.
Oops.
What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing. Tyler, have you got a chance to use it yet?
What's that? I think you're muted.
That was a yes. No.
He's muted.
What?
Yes,
I think it was a
yes,
maybe.
I have.
Yeah.
It was a very nice means of, I've got 2 Razer mice here that I leveraged and did a pass-through for an engagement. So
I know of a company that has done similar, that went down to the local Newegg or whichever Best Buy, and they had them in stock, and grabbed one and was working on an assessment for one of those devices, and game over, man. Yep.
it kind of feels like cheating because it is so stupid easy, but it is nice.
But it's yeah, I mean, it is stupid easy. Agreed. But for how many years have we talked about limiting the devices that you can plug into your organizational devices, your organizational systems, by hey, we only allow these specific USB thumb drives from these manufacturers because they can be secured, and we only allow these keyboard and the mice because we've audited the process.
But it sounds like that's totally spoofable. So.
But if you have endpoint protection that only allows certain PIDs, and
so don't allow Razer mice. But then you've got the support nightmare where I'm traveling, I need a mouse.
Sorry,
and
not on your enterprise device. You don't. You got to get a trackpad that's there. Use it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's tricky.
It limits your attack surface, right? From like a red team standpoint, we always look up like what manufacturers do these people use, what kind of computers they use. We program all of our vids and PIDs to match those. Look for anybody using certain hardware with inside of pictures, social media, like all those things are things you take into consideration, you program for.
Yep.
That's probably a little bit more advanced than the drive-by attack, random attacker doing it. So you're just limiting that defense in depth and attack surface.
Yep.
I think we got a little feedback on Discord that many of those things ignore the keyboard and mouse.
For just the support reasons, right?
Yeah, and from thinking about that back in the day, you could actually specifically some of the stuff that I worked with, it was a pain in the ass to manage. But you could allow only, as opposed to a block list, you could do an allow list.
Yeah,
and that would be good. So.
That's hard to that's hard to maintain. I can't. Yeah. If I'm the CISO, I have a tough time putting that policy in place and selling that to my board, management, and all of my users. But I get it. Like, I would also implement a policy that's like, you can't use wireless keyboards, especially. But enforcing that in the real world, that's hard. Someone's just going to get a Bluetooth keyboard. Then what do you do? Like, I don't know. I think that's a losing battle from a defender perspective.
Some of those restrictions, they have to be for specific scenarios with specific risk profile.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, we have some systems I can really restrict the USB peripherals, and some people have gone so far as to put glue in the USB ports, which we don't allow anymore. But that's not a huge chunk of systems. There's very specific mission for those systems.
Yeah, you work backwards, right? Like your critical assets. You start with the critical assets that shouldn't have things plugged into it, and they have very specific data sets in it. And you work backwards and just fix those. The rest of the users, you're going to take a business risk and a kind of an assumed risk around physical access and hope that you've got other controls and mitigations in place.
Yeah, but be careful on your servers, Tyler. If you're limiting the devices to be plugged in, you get ransomware and you need to go recover, and you're like, Wait, I don't have one of the approved keyboards handy, and Amazon's or Best Buy's out of stock. Now you've just shot yourself in the foot.
Yes. Time to go dumpster diving.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know how that goes. I mean, especially today, ordering stuff, in the pandemic world, like what's available and what's not is a crapshoot today. Like keyboards, we're talking about keyboards, right? Keyboards, I'm like, we need some more extra keyboards here in the studio. Like we built a bunch of systems. We use the keyboards we have. Like I want to go buy I bought a batch of them. Like these work great. It was a reasonable price because I need to buy 2 or 4, at a clip because they come in sets of 2. And then I go order it again because I'm like, I want 2 more. It was like $20, $30 for 2 keyboards. I'm like, perfect. I need them for labs. No, that's not available anymore. So I had to buy a different brand. You know what I mean? Like you get into this kind of whitelisting and however you want to call it, allow list, blacklist for these USB devices. It gets tricky. It gets
Agreed. Agreed.
Remember it was just the old thing. Did you have one of those old keyboards that had that round connector, or do you have USB? Because usually you grab the wrong one out of the drawer.
Oh, which
some gamers still prefer that PS2 port for speed and responsiveness, right?
AT or PS2?
PS2 is the one I was referring to.
Yeah, see, when you had to have the AT to PS2 adapter.
Oh man, I remember those.
And then when you had a USB keyboard and you needed the AT to PS2 to USB adapter.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know this.
Long string of adapters. A lot of gaming motherboards still come with that PS2 port on it for just that reason.
Yep.
Anyway, Linux attackers are taking advantage of unpatched vulnerabilities.
Which ones?
In other news, water is wet.
Oh man!
Let me check the weather. It's dark.
Yes. So why are people still running these end-of-life versions of Linux distributions? I think we all know why, because they started out with an outdated image or misconfigured them, as the article says, and people never patched them. Why? Fear of breaking the application, and that's how we end up with legacy software. And Linux, I think, is particularly interesting to think about that, because if you've got that application that's using Linux or whatever, it could just be hanging out there. People don't maybe understand how it worked in the first place. They don't want to change it. They don't want to update it. And it's running Linux, and maybe you don't have a Linux admin anymore. Maybe that person left. So it's just, it's hanging out there.
So just a vector. That was pointed out to me by Goose that Linux just turned 30. Can you believe it?
Oh my God.
And I added an article to the show notes for this one. I'm just like, holy crap, I can't believe it's been 30 years since Linus Torvalds put out that free OS. Wasn't intended to be a mainstream. I don't think he intended it to get as big as it is.
Well, I mean, if we're, I don't know, mince, but it was a kernel. So Linux kernel is 30 years old. A lot of those utilities predate the Linux kernel, right? And the distributions are really what put all those things together.
If the Linux kernel is 30 years old, do you know what that means?
We're old.
Linus Torvalds is old.
Yes.
Right?
I'm not old. Linus is old. Right.
Linux is all grown up, and so is Linus.
I don't know we talked about that last week. The audience got to hear our conversation with Wheel, and the Sequoia vulnerability that Wheel and team disclosed through Qualys. I was really excited to talk to Wheel in our prep call, because I'm like, this is a Linux vulnerability. I'm like, did you get to talk to Linus? I'm like, what did he say? Like, what was it like? Like, I was really kind of nerding out on it. And he's like, no, the public, he said in the interview, everyone, hopefully everyone listened to last week, that publicly sometimes Linus is really harsh, right? I think he's grown in the past 30 years. And also, Wheels, like, we contacted him privately. He's like, he was really nothing like that kind of public persona that he puts on. He was really appreciative of our work, and accepted our change. Like, oh, yep, that's an issue. He's like, yep, this kind of thing can happen, and it was just like really good to work with. I think that's talking to your article, Lee, really a maturity level that the Linux kernel and associated software like device drivers and other things that go into the kernel has reached today.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Lee just went all
cyborg on us.
Cyborg on us.
Lee went cyborg. Oh my God, he totally did.
You still there, Lee?
Exterminate.
I'm still here, but I don't know what's going on. I'm just focusing on Linux. I just remember the first call I got when my user had installed Linux on the machine, and we didn't support it. I had never seen it, and he had his disk integrity check wouldn't work, and I told him, I don't know anything about Linux, but try FSCK minus B32, and it came up. Just one of those weird crossover commands. Like you said, Paul, the commands are older than the kernel.
Yeah, the GNU utilities, yeah.
Well, and, you know, an FS check by moving to the next superblock is the ultimate answer, right?
And honestly, it sounded like Lee ran that command on his connection because he sounded better after that.
Yeah.
Did.
Yeah, Lee, I don't know, your audio device is kind of wigging out. Sometimes unplugging it, plug it back in, works. We've had
I was going to try turning it off and on again.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some interesting issues. We had a webinar issue today with USB audio devices on Windows. Kind of weird.
Well, I turned on Lee's QoS with my C2 channel.
There you go.
Nice.
Nicely done.
Oh, was that why my lights blinked?
I like to be helpful that way.
Love you, man. Appreciate it.
Jeff, I want to get your take on my article number 8. And the title was How Data Brokers Sell Access to the Backbone of the Internet. Essentially, what this article is talking about is internet service providers that have NetFlow data, who they share it with, who those people share it with, and how that data is used. Is it a privacy violation? Could it be used for bad? Could it be used for good? What I thought was interesting is how the... let's see, Team Simaru provided access to the Citizen Lab. I believe it was a Citizen Lab project. So they could conduct some research, which ultimately ended up being used for good. They needed to identify victims of Canadrew's infrastructure in a project they worked on. And those of you that follow Citizen Lab, they do great work to highlight some of the nefarious things that are happening on not just the internet, but with cyber criminals in particular. And I thought it was interesting how NetFlow data could be used for bad and good, much like the tools we create can be used for bad or for good. And I think the article the title makes it seem like selling this data or access to this data is really bad. I'm like, not all the time, right?
Well, that's hard to tell, right? The first thing that people should realize is that NetFlow data is metadata. It's not a full packet contents, right? NetFlow data has always been essentially, in a communication, the sort of 5-tuple, right? It's the protocol, the source port, the source IP, destination port.
You mean it's like who called who on the telephone, not what they said? Because the NSA kind of got in trouble for that too.
Exactly. That's the perfect analogy. That's the perfect analogy, right? So in a way, you're right. When I was involved back way long ago in some university research efforts, even though we had either shortened PCAP data, which was just like the first 60 bytes, 64 bytes, or we had NetFlow data, we were still asked to anonymize the source and destination with a recognizable tokenization of sorts, right? So that might be replacing the first 2 octets of the IP address to something else, or things like that, because it still has some privacy concerns, and it still is a record of the conversation from a metadata perspective. It's not an actual full transcription. So that's the thing, and it's always been kind of hotly debated as to whether you should distribute that data or not. It makes me a little nervous when major tier 1 ISPs are openly distributing that data, perhaps amongst each other and amongst other organizations. That's a very big deal, I think.
It was interesting at university.
Sorry, there was a bug.
It makes me remember. It brings up some things that conversations, and I think even like official policies, paperwork that I signed in agreement with the chief information officer at the university that was like, yes, Paul and his team, like this team, can collect full packet and other data on the network for the purposes of security monitoring, provided they protect that data. They don't share that data, and it's only used for identifying security breaches and security related incidents, and not to violate the privacy of the student body and or faculty. And we came, I even think, I want to say, to a written agreement where like, yes, we're going to grant you this authorization, and a lot of that was also covered on employee agreement, that like we're not going to be bad actors essentially and spy on people. Like there was kind of that, I don't know if we had to put that in writing or that was just assumed in our employment for the university, that we were going to be good people and not assholes, basically, right? Also, when we collected data and then we would go to, as you know, working for a university, we shared a lot of information in very not public forums, but semi-public forums with other universities, and then we would anonymize that data to a certain extent as well. I would imagine similar protocols are in place for this type of sharing with Team Simaru and others. Tyler's got this big grin on his face, like he's got some kind of comment or something on this. Tyler, what are your thoughts?
It may have also been the memes I was posting in Slack.
Oh, okay.
Just trying to help you out there, Tyler.
Thanks, man. This data has been around for a long time. Team Cymru does a fantastic job of curating this data.
What did you call them?
It's Team Cymru.
Cymru is what a lot of people call it, and I think that is the correct pronunciation. After I
said Simru. I always read that in my brain as Simru. I don't know that I ever actually verbalized it amongst peers, maybe. So,
Cymru?
Team Cymru. Yeah.
That's not how I would have pronounced it based on
me either. Okay. Me either. For many reasons.
Yes, for many reasons. Anyway,
the data sets are very, very vast. Like they collect pretty much everything at layer 3. You can correlate things from entry into a VPN, exit out of a VPN, entry into a Tor node, exit out of a Tor node. The data itself is it covers probably 97% of the internet. So these data sets exist. They've existed for a while. They're utilized and very heavily scrutinized as far as who has access to them. It's a substantial amount of money and investment to get access or partnership with some of these companies. But it's the correlation in the back end. This is just raw data. You're talking about a massive amount of data. They're only able to store or save up to 3 months of data.
Yeah,
so your ability to ingest that data is highly dependent on what you can do with that data. And then the ability to correlate that raw data at layer 2 and 3 to other data, say like ad tracking data or mobile identification data. That's when it gets really, really interesting. And there's companies that hunt people utilizing these data sets. So there's some privacy concerns. Actually, but
there's one more point. There's one more point that I feel like I should make, and on this topic. One is it's not just up to OSI layer 3. It actually usually NetFlow does go up to OSI layer 4, so it does include the protocol and then the port information.
Oh, you're right.
TCP and UDP. The other point is. It is very resource intensive for switching and routing devices to generate NetFlow data. And so it is often the case that it is sampled NetFlow data rather than real-time, because real-time is extremely difficult to produce. These devices have got a lot of other things to do. And so not that I'm saying
it is latency.
Impossible,
it is not sampled, though.
Yeah, I imagine if you have dedicated devices, and they do exist, that they don't have to be sampled. But if they're coming off switching and routing devices, they generally do have to be sampled because it's not possible to generate otherwise. So you're going to have a mix.
It's almost all backbone is pretty much where we'll say the majority of this data comes from.
Yes.
Yeah, and those routers have enough compute power to implement the routing protocols, which is their primary mission in life, which is very processor intensive, as well as collect the NetFlow data. However,
that's a maybe or maybe not.
Right, but in my experience, if push came to shove on these devices, they would stop logging in favor of supporting the routing protocols. At least the Cisco devices, right?
Yeah, but it's not it's not all that difficult to put an inline, tap of sorts that just generates netflow. That's not difficult to do.
Agreed. So. And a lot of ISPs would do that for troubleshooting purposes as well, and monitoring purposes for their own the health of their networks, right?
They absolutely
almost have to at that point. 10 things you must do to avoid getting hacked. We all love these articles, don't we? I know, but I have to say, if we were to write this article, I think we would come up with some of the same points on here, because I see the headline and I'm like, ugh. This could be, like, it's either one of three things. It's either a unicorn, and I'm like, holy crap, it's a really good article, or it's like, well, it's not bad. And then the majority of the time, these articles are a complete shit show.
I wish I could read it, because I could read it with a free. I read the rest of the story with a free account.
Incognito mode. So it's not a bad list. So if I were to have a conversation with my users, I would probably talk about a lot of things in this list. Multi-factor authentication, using a password vault, keeping your software updated, using something other than SMS for your second factor, not installing random crap software from the internet and browser extensions is, I think, the thing that saves my family and probably a lot of our families, because they live with us. Yep. We tell them, if like you need something to go download it, like ask mom or dad first. Like, let's find the legitimate version of what you need to solve your problem, rather than just the first one or two clicks off of Google, because that could get you in trouble.
Yeah. We had this conversation in our house just the other day. Our 13-year-old daughter got a laptop to do some gaming and that type of stuff and streaming. She got that for Christmas, and she comes downstairs with her laptop the other day and she says, "Dad, I can't work on my book report, my summer book report, because Google Docs won't allow me to edit this document, because it says I need to disable my browser extensions because there's a bad one." And I'm like, well, okay, then that's interesting. So we go and look at all our extensions, and there are no browser extensions loaded in the interface. Oh, digging in and so forth and so on, and turns out, Malwarebytes finds out that she has 22 pieces of malware on her system. And I'm like, okay. And I said, oh man, I can only imagine how many mommy has on her systems, because she doesn't have antivirus, and she does all these coupon things that you get down the shady.
Yeah, there's some dangerous add-ons for games and extensions for video games. Yeah.
So it became a challenge in the house. Like, Corinne had 22 pieces of malware on her system, and like, okay, let's see if mommy beats you. And we ran Malwarebytes on mommy's system, and one. Yep. One piece of malware on our system. And it was coupon related.
Yeah.
So,
probably some ad tracker, most likely.
Yep. Corinne won. She had 22 pieces, and you know what my answer was? Stop clicking shit.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? I didn't do anything. I'm like, it's a joke. Joke. You can thank Boris Federlich.
There's some good advice in here, plus links to a lot of the software that I would recommend. I mean, like Google Authenticator Duo, 1Password, LastPass. Like,
now this is it's an article. I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, great.
They hit some of the highlights that any of us would say.
Personally, or for an enterprise, right? Like, this is advice we want our users to learn from and implement.
Yeah. I mean, I love that number one, right? A password manager app. Yeah, why not?
Well, and 1Password had some issues. SpectreOps did a little investigation. When you read this report, you realize it was not a little investigation. This took some time. And I think they rightfully pointed out that when you're discovering vulnerabilities, there is not just one path, but many paths.
This is your story number 27 for the record.
Yeah, story number 27. You go down these paths and you come up short until you find the right answer. And what a detailed post they put together.
I actually don't believe in password managers. I'll just put that out there, because I'm old school and think you should keep it in your brain.
You secretly have that. You secretly have that book that you picked up at the bookstore. That's a little notebook that says passwords on it. That's your password manager.
Keep it in my brain.
That's a lot.
Do I forget a lot of them? Yes.
Yes.
Well, am I locked out of a lot of sites that I only wanted to use once in the first place?
The exponential complexity factor for me is what was my username, and then if it was an email address, which email address it was. It's not so much. I could probably, if I came up with the right algorithm, Jeff, to your credit, right? Especially like given your background, you could train your brain to come up with an algorithm to remember passwords, but it's the exponential factor of like, what did I set as my username?
Yeah, the first one is, what the fuck is my username?
Yes.
And was it an email address, and which email address was it?
That's what makes it.
Which persona was it?
And then, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then it becomes, okay, which password was it? Shit.
But, I have 1 or 2 or 3 what I consider to be throwaway passwords, the ones that I don't, you need a password because you're clicking on something to do one time, and it's a throwaway. So I have throwaway passwords. The ones that I usually still use a good one.
Password 1.
But put a space in there somewhere. But I mean, the guys that run Crack Me If You Can at DEF CON, they used to work for me. And they've given me a lot of great tips over the years. Length is key. Mm-hmm. So I use long passwords, but they're phrases, they're obscure phrases, and then you start mixing up and I've had arguments with people like, oh, but guessing words, you just dictionaries, you can do it. And I'm like, if you mix it up enough, and one of the biggest things you can do to defeat a cracking program is just put a space in your password.
Yeah, because it increases the level of entropy, and it can increases the key space massively just to have a space.
Yep. Yeah, actually, you got to be careful with that. I've had organizational hashes where they've had nice sentences with spaces in them, and we've cracked them pretty handily. So it's not always.
I'm not saying put the space in the expected places.
There you go.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Now you clarify
that. And don't, like I was reading a document for a client, and they were showing examples of strong passwords, and they were using phrases, but they were capitalizing the first letter of each word. I'm like, no. Capitalize the second, third, or fourth, or fifth, or randomly capitalize different characters. That also is going to add entropy and complexity.
And anytime you see one of those passwords in a presentation or something like that, always add it to your dictionary. Just because.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just because.
Family movie night and correct battery horse staple are always in my word list.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to...
The one thing I'll say about a password vault is if in an enterprise everybody is forced to use it, and they're using the password generation mechanisms within it. The old adage, you don't have to crack all the passwords, you just need one. That goes down a lot. Hopefully, Joff, Larry, tell me I'm wrong.
I'm just not going there.
Yeah. Well, I also think the benefit of,
because there's a bypass.
And we were talking to the Keeper, who's a sponsor on the network, very much similar to the other competitors, LastPass, OnePassword that we've mentioned already. I think from an enterprise perspective, you shouldn't be sharing credentials, right? You should be creating separate accounts for people. But there's also times where in an enterprise setting, you have to share maybe not a password, but a secret of some kind. I'll give you an example. I have to go generate an SSL certificate or key pair. I then have to share that maybe with a developer. In your DevOps world, I got to share it with a developer that's got to put that in a production system. Wait, how do I... What's the... Maybe a one-off, like you figure out how to do that, but like on a regular basis, operationally, you need to share secrets, API keys, certificates, and certificate keys within the organization. How do you do that? I think a password manager in an enterprise setting is a great way to secure those communications. Otherwise they end up in places where people like Joff and Larry and Tyler go find them. So.
Yeah, like sticky notes in socks and Knox and stuff.
Slack messages or
your password's only as good as your endpoint security, because the keylogger will capture whatever length of password you have.
Right.
Now, having some spaces at the end of your password, depending on how sophisticated your keylogger is, whether it captures those spaces properly, that's helps
kind of
too.
fun.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
My favorite one lately.
Nice thing about spaces at the end of the password, if you crack it, you may miss that there's a space at the end of the cracked value and not.
Right. Good point, Lee.
So, silly question: if you're copying a password out of a password vault, does the keylogger see it?
Depends on the keylogger, especially if it's
yes,
copy pasta.
for clipboard,
If it's monitoring the clipboard.
Keyboards.
Yep.
Yeah. Clipboard monitoring.
A lot of post-exploitation tools include that clipboard monitoring.
Yep.
Capability.
Tyler, what was that one that you and Adam worked on? It wasn't NISHO. It was something else. I can't remember what it was.
That was an internal tool.
No, it's public.
Is it?
Yep.
The one that we jumped into the ICS environment through WSUS clipboard.
Maybe.
Clipboard C2 was one of them, but
give me 1 second here. I'll find it. Invoke clipboard.
I think that's private.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Negative. That is not private. It has not been because you guys talked about it at a conference.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Yep. Yeah. We just used it a different way. That's right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep.
Phew.
Joff, you teach a whole class on C2 communications. My story number 25 talks about a new variant of the PRISM backdoor that targets Linux systems. What I found kind of interesting about this is they flew under the radar. And I'm not quite sure how they flew under the radar, because when I looked at it, it was basically like in 3.5 years, no one noticed what the C2 servers were, and it's HTTP for communications, and it's using a very specific user agent, which I think we would be able to detect. But in this case, AT&T's Alien Vault research team said this one flew under the radar for 3.5 years. No one took down the C2 infrastructure. And on Virus Total, its samples were like so low that like no one would really discover it using the threat intelligence kind of feeds.
Well, so, Virus Total, first of all, right? I mean, a lot of the stuff that I teach is all about how to create, sort of 0-day samples with any of your software that you're going to put on the client side, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, Virus Total is one of those things that, good luck with any of my malware, because every time I put something out there, it's got a brand new hash, right?
And therefore, you're flying in that sense, you're flying under the radar organically. Yeah,
organically. Now, but on the traffic side, though, and using a plain text protocol with a well-known user agent, probably with a well-known payload that's easy to analyze, people just weren't looking for it, right?
But you and I both know active countermeasures and looking for those C2 communications. You would see that, right?
Yeah. So active countermeasures is very, very focused on the beaconing aspect, right? And still is, which is important. Because you do need to poll when you've got a C2 channel. There is a regular heartbeat, regular beacon that has to occur at some level. It doesn't have to necessarily be an even frequency, but it is something that has to continually communicate with the C2 infrastructure out there. Now, it is possible to highly distribute the C2 infrastructure and to kind of multiplex that around, right? And if I haven't read too close in the article, but if PRISM is an example of this, it might be much more difficult to catch if you're spreading out those transactions and you're not beaconing to one or a small set of reliable destinations.
It's interesting though, Joff, like thinking about it, so many sites and browsers have enforced SSL and TLS that being HTTP is almost an anomaly. Like you've got much less sheer HTTP traffic potentially when you're comparing that to the browsing habits,
That's a really good point, because just almost everything is hanging out in TLS these days, and maybe people are not looking so much, right? I know it's a valid point. I can, the other thing that strikes me is just kind of interesting. Recently, on an engagement, I've been busted by DNS technology as well that actually looks at and quite literally, and I can say this one out loud, actually black-holed a CloudFront domain by analyzing. I don't know how actually they did it, but they decided that was malicious after my C2 channel was running for some 48 hours or so.
Is that's Amazon's CDN technology, CloudFront, correct?
Yeah, I mean that was pretty bold, right? To step in front of CloudFront and go, nope, that CloudFront domain is bad.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because a CloudFront domain, you would think you were like some random string .cloudfront, .aws.com or whatever. You would think that's a valid domain. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost always profiling, right? The heuristics and the traffic for the profile, they're picking up those.
That's it. That comes back to a statistical clustering kind of mechanism that's looking at the regular heartbeats and probably looked at the fact that my C2 client side was doing a DNS lookup to resolve the CloudFront domain, probably for every single connection. In this case, it was Cobalt Strike underneath it. So it's probably a vulnerability in the way the stageless Cobalt Strike stuff works. So that's actually, I need to go back into the lab a little bit on that one and look at it to see what's going on there. And it could be the TTL on the CloudFront domain was low enough that it kept going to the upstream DNS provider, and they saw the frequency of that, and they said, okay, that's it. We're going to black hole that.
Now you got to do Route 53 to get some actual domains in there with some reputation to be interacting with your CloudFront.
Right. It just opened up a
works
whole Pandora's box of stuff that I want to do.
It's amazing how I don't know if I had one of the stories in there that came across. I don't know if I wrote it up, but Amazon lets you both, in my previous experience with Route 53, actually register a domain through Route 53 and also get a certificate through Amazon. Like you could do everything through an AWS service to stand up a new site with a domain name with a certificate.
You can. The problem with that is like you start to end up with something like Team Cymru data where you're doing an operation, they see all of your traffic, they pick up one beacon, and they make a call to AWS, and now they have, with Team Cymru data, you can see every communication back to any entry point for command and control or access to the Cobalt Strike server, and you can set your whole infrastructure and operation down in one fell swoop and one called AWS,
right?
Because you're all on one platform.
If it's all new as well, I'm sure they're taking that into account. If you get the Team Cymru data, you're like, hey, someone just spun up a brand new domain with CloudFront, with Route 53, with a brand new certificate. If that stuff is all new, I'm sure that is detectable in some way as well.
So something that's yeah, sorry.
No,
something that's really interesting there is.
I was just gonna let them keep fighting over who's gonna.
You want to dance? Want to dance?
Yeah.
All right, Joff, and then Tyler.
So something that's really interesting that I just noticed was on that actual topic is the TTL on the default CloudFront domain creation is 60 seconds. So that is going to force an upstream provider to look it up on a periodic basis. So next time I do some C2 setup, I'm probably going to
adjust
remediate that issue and set a stupidly long TTL on the DNS infrastructure.
Less chatter, basically. Yeah.
So they're seeing DNS lookups as potentially beaconing traffic, which is kind of interesting. And I had another thing to say, but I totally lost it because I'm middle-aged or something.
Tyler, did you have something to add on that, or?
No, I mean a lot of what we're seeing from like C2 or like advanced actors or even stuff that we're working on, right? Like the big push and the big move is to get your C2 into SaaS applications, right? So things like Slack. If you're seeing regular Slack messages with inside of that, and your C2 is posting Slack messages as a C2 channel, it's a lot less obvious for them to be able to completely block or shut down Slack. That's a very difficult thing to do at a channel or team level. And so we've seen a shift in malware and some more advanced toolkits start to make that shift to SaaS applications, O365, EWS, Slack,
Discord,
Zapier apps, Discord. those things are much more difficult because the chatter and the channels, well, we have profiles in C2. Some of those things can be signatured and looked at and evaluated.
You're literally hiding in the
Slack
noise.
And SaaS applications, your
point.
API call.
No, that's
right?
that's a good
those
point.
Things are continual.
And actually, that really does speak to the AWS domains as well. I mean, everything that we're doing here is trying to hide amongst the noise, right? Instead of making your and it has the additional benefit of hiding your back end as much as you can, right? And it's always good to hide your back end.
Always good to hide. Always good. CYA.
Yeah, CYA, exactly. The other thing I was going to say real quick, and it just came back to me, was in terms of the CDNs, I haven't seen AWS stop us from using them, but I have seen Microsoft stop us.
Interesting.
Azure has certainly cut us off when we at times when we've tried to route C2 traffic through them. So,
I did want to talk about a man who was robbed of 16 Bitcoin.
This is interesting.
Pretty sizable chunk of change. Sues the Thieves' parents. Mark Rash, very famous former prosecutor with the U.S. Justice Department, said the plaintiff is claiming.
Mark.
Yeah, have we had Mark on the show? No, we need to have him back. Plaintiff is claiming the parents are liable because gave them notice of a crime committed by their kids and they failed to respond. A lot of these crimes are being committed by juveniles, and we don't have a good juvenile justice system that's well designed to both civilly and criminally go after kids, so they're going after the parents.
So how are they providing attribution to this, though? That's what I want to.
With some of the Bitcoin addresses provided attribution.
So Tyler, from my understanding, reading the story was that copy paste stealing Trojan on the victim's computer that was used by some individuals to transfer Bitcoin from their wallet to another one at Bitfinex. And Bitfinex account was tied to a specific individual with a specific name under the age of 18.
I mean, that's how I do it too. I transfer to someone else's Bitcoin wallet before I transfer it out.
Yep. But
what are you saying? The parents are in on it?
I'm just saying, like,
somebody else, like, it's a compromised bit.
I like how Tyler always kind of.
No, what I'm saying, I think
glean like tinfoil hat stuff.
What I think Tyler is saying is that Bitfinex being compromised and transferring it to some random wallet, but based on what I gathered, that it is still sitting in some 18-year-old or under 18-year-old kid's wallet, and if that were me and it showed up in my wallet, I wouldn't. Yeah.
Even more proof that 18-year-old has no fucking idea that that's his Bitcoin.
Well, the article also said there was some posts, and there was the 18 or sub 18-year-old was asking how do they cash out of the Bitcoin. This is a Krebs on security article, of course, very detailed. Yeah.
Yep. Also, the email that I saw that was in that article seemed kind of all the things that we teach our users not to click on, like I am from Nigeria, king from Nigeria, want you to click on this thing. If your son has done a bad thing, pornography, send Bitcoin to this address. Like, it felt scammy to me. No wonder why the parents didn't respond.
See, I mean, I don't know. Like, this is where I think I would personally draw the line. Like, Bitcoin is there. Bitcoin wallet transfers happen. You mess up on your Bitcoin, it's like cash. You're fucked. You drop $100,000 on the ground and someone picks it up. Like, yeah, you can try and sue them and prove that that's yours, but that's kind of BS. Like, you dropped the cash and you transferred it. It's done.
Yep, it's gone.
I don't like this liability with crypto that but opens up a whole lot more.
But so Tyler, what do you feel about someone that has Bitcoin and they got SIM swapped?
Yeah, you should have probably had some fucking SIM protections in. Like, you got SIM swapped. Like, don't tie SMS to your damn Bitcoin. But
the problem is that. That was the only thing that was available, and the SIM swap wasn't their fault. It was because of the provider that allowed the SIM swap to happen.
I think, putting my lawyer hat on, which I'm not a lawyer, I just have a hat, that
Nor did you say it at Holiday Inn Express last night?
The SIM swapping is the fraud, right? Yep. But proving the damages from that fraud is what you have to prove of, Tyler, your example, the $100,000 I dropped on the ground. So prosecuting someone for SIM swapping, you have to prove fraud, but then you have to prove those damages, and that's the real, more difficult thing. Obviously, SIM swapping is
also have to prove mens rea.
That
you also have to prove mens rea and habeas corpus.
This is where we have to get an attorney on the line.
Yep.
Right. Oh man.
I mean, but an attorney is always going to go with the liability standpoint of this, like thinking outside of the attorney and like law and all the BS that the law and legalities bring.
Fiduciary harm. You have to prove fiduciary harm. Fiduciary harm.
He just wanted to use that word.
I did. Where I don't want lawyers to get their sticky, grubby little hands in for liability and class action and private suing. Like, crypto's kind of managed to stay out of that space. You fuck up in crypto, you're messed up. Like, you gotta know your shit. Do your shit right. Like, if you mess up and someone steals it, and you maybe fly to a third world country and get your damn crypto wallet back, no one's the wiser. You didn't break any laws. There's no people suing you.
It's not real currency, right? It's not real currency, right, Tyler?
I'm seeing a T-shirt, right? I'm seeing a T-shirt here for Tyler that says on the front cryptocurrency, and on the back says "Don't fuck it up."
Yeah, and don't lose your thumb drive with your wallet on it.
That too.
Yeah, but I mean, then you get into like insurance too. But you get into insurance, like what you do diligence, and where I get concerned when we've got financial harm that maybe isn't a criminal punishment by certain standards. You can't get the federal authorities involved because there's not enough of that monetary loss. But you get into the Darknet Diaries episode where he chronicled someone who was SIM swapped and they were sending pizzas to their house to try and extort the short handles on social media platforms. And that's where I think like there's bad things happening and we need laws to protect innocent people, but it's still flying under the radar, and criminals know this, so they're like focusing on this narrow area where they can make money and fly under the radar of law enforcement and in the justice system here in the U.S. Right. That's where I take issue. I want to see that problem addressed because I feel bad for the victims. And you really listen to Darknet Diaries episode, man, you feel bad for the victims. They're sending pizza to their house at 11 o'clock at night and stuff. They're sending pizza to their parents' house and stuff like that. Like that. That episode still rubs me the wrong way. I get angry when I talk about it.
And I think there's a place where you can bring the law into this, but the ramifications of doing so, like you start to think about smart contracts, right? And how many things hinge on smart contracts, not even just talking about cryptocurrency, but smart contracts where contracts are code and certain actions happen, often with cryptocurrency tied to those. That code is set in stone. And if you start to bring in liability and lawyers and insurance inside of some of these smart contracts, the whole cryptocurrency smart contract and the appeal of what this code as a contract brings starts to fall apart. You're back to where we are now with liability, legalities, and people getting sue happy with tort cases and civil cases.
We hit all the buzzwords there.
Yeah, we did.
The legal. None of us are attorneys, but we hit all the buzzwords. I don't know if we used them correctly, but we used all the buzzwords. I'm proud of us.
Yeah. I think we leveraged our core competencies.
Yes. So what you're saying, Tyler, is we need homomorphic encryption. Never mind.
To seek synergy.
To seek synergies.
Yeah.
With that single pane of glass.
Hey, Paul.
Yes.
You forgot about we need blockchain. Come on, dude.
We need blockchain. We need a blockchain. That's going to save us all.
And smart contracts.
And smart contracts.
So, any NFTs? Do we need any?
Of course, we forgot the NFTs.
Oh yeah, and Sec 554 if you want to learn about smart contracts seriously.
Any other stories that we want to cover this week?
So there was one out there that I was kind of surprised about, and it wasn't. I added as my number 2 just kind of as a throwaway, but There was a story about Cloudflare detecting a huge DDoS attack.
Oh yeah, we covered this on ESW.
The thing that got me, I say Cloudflare, and I think CDN. Well, they actually have another business. They have this autonomous edge DDoS protection. Mm-hmm. They're like all over the damn world. They're like in a couple hundred data centers with many terabytes of traffic. I'm like, holy crap.
Well, that's part of the appeal of CDNs, right? And some of the protections that CDNs as a service with add-ons, with DDoS protection add-ons, that's some of the things that they provide as part of like why you would set that up for, you know, something that's semi-public or very, very large.
My question is why? Like, Cloudflare has stated that it was a 17.2 million requests per second DDoS attack.
To test a botnet. In fact, I seen this go down probably about 6 months back with when Twitter, Instagram, and one other major site went down. I was on one of the forums, and they were testing a botnet, and they were trying to demonstrate, like, hey, here's the sites. They're going to go down. Watch. Here is 1.5 trillion
requests per
terabytes in requests, UDP requests to these servers, and sure enough, they went down right there. It was a demonstration.
Yeah. Now, who wants to rent me?
Sale of that botnet. Yeah, exactly. That's how it went down.
This was a Mirai botnet, according to the reports as well.
There's another thing that's going on too, and that is that that ransomware DDoS is now a thing. So instead of exfilling your data and getting you to pay to get it back, they'll just DDoS the crap out of you until you capitulate and pay.
Yeah, that's old school too. We've seen that in history as well. Like ransomware, it's just like, we got encryption, so we can encrypt your data. But really, ransomware is about cutting off access to your data, whether it's encrypted or whether it's a DDoS attack or whatever it is. Right? They want you to pay. It's extortion.
Yeah, so it's
what it is.
It's an interesting trend, and I was like in a webinar last week, and I was learning about it. I'm like, holy mackerel, this is crazy.
Yeah, but that's what gets me about and concerns me about the focus on ransomware is it tends to segue into this data security thing. I'm like, really what they're after is disrupting operations and making you pay to get your operations back. Right. Some of it focuses on the data. But like, what if they were just to take out your operations? I mean, sure, you need your data maybe for your operations, okay, but you also need the connectivity and your and all this other stuff for operations. They're just going to take that away. Like, we haven't seen the full. We see ransomware like really the more tentacles coming out, right? Like we're holding your data hostage, and
I've seen encrypting it. I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going.
Yes. Lots of tentacles.
This is where it gets interesting, right? We've already seen them take over VMware vCenter, right? Like starting to encrypt your data center, which is operations infrastructure, multiple machines. Like forget the data. The data lives inside of all those machines. That's your capability to operate. But I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago when we said SaaS applications are single sign-on. Someone takes that over, changes your two-factor authentication, takes over.
That's where I'm going as an
whatever
attacker,
application,
right? You've got Azure SSO. Like, I'm just going to take that over. And like, how much operationally am I going to impact your organization from an like, that's big.
Tyler just reminded me of something. One of my favorite things to do on pen tests, if I get that far, is just put a screenshot of their virtual infrastructure in like, hey, look, I'm logged in as administrator to your virtual infrastructure. That gets attention.
Yep.
Right.
Big time. Yeah. Big time.
Big time.
Yeah. I think it's more security is a more holistic approach than just protecting your data. I don't want to discount that as being like not important. Right? Obviously, it's important. You have to protect your data, but you have to protect your entire operations as an organization. That also means, Joff, to your point, protecting access to those systems and services that run your operation, and that's your VDI infrastructure, that's your cloud infrastructure, that's your SaaS infrastructure, that's your data. It's all of those.
That's your CRM. Think about Cisco. Yep. Like if someone took over Cisco's Salesforce and got the admin account, changed the password and the two-factor authentication, and locked everybody out, what is daily sales worth to someone that is doing billions of dollars?
Tyler thinking with his ultimate evil hat on.
We love Tyler's evil hat.
It's a really big evil hat.
Of course. That's why Tyler's here. I mean, come on, it makes it actually. I always love when you bring that perspective. Tyler.
I mean, that's not the only reason he's here. I mean, he looks good too.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's that.
Well, and if you ever get to meet him in person, he
feel younger.
And if you ever get to meet him in person, he smells kind of nice too.
He does smell nice.
He smells nice.
And that hair.
And oh my God, the hair.
Oh,
Larry,
rock hard. The hair.
It is. It doesn't move, dude.
No, it doesn't.
What hair? Oh, Tyler's hair.
Let's talk about more theoretical things that maybe aren't quite as scary, like eavesdropping by LED. I think that's a good story. Because I love talking about this. I mean, part of it is C2 infrastructure, sort of, but also like data exfiltration that is using these. We've covered so many stories over the years. But what's amazing is, like, we're never done covering these stories about how innovative and abusing of technology that could seem innocuous. I mean, we've seen alternating fan speeds, reading pixels on a screen, the radio waves, sound waves.
How much energy your television consumes that can be monitored by your power meter so you can tell what show you're watching.
And LEDs, like anything, if you study physics, that could be studied in a, for lack of a better term, like a scientific manner, we've kind of covered as attackers could use that to exfiltrate data, and this is just the latest iteration of that.
And this was one of those. They basically got in a Zoom call with a set of external speakers, and the LED, the power light on the speaker, was observed from 35 meters away via telescope. And they could observe the pulsing of the LED, because as the speaker is moving, it is consuming electricity, which is drawing from the LED a little bit, which is changing the LED very subtly. And they were able to recover waveforms from the pulsing of the LED in the set of speakers.
Oh, can we talk about like resistance and
I feel smart with my C2 and like ways to get out of shit until like you read these stories and you're like, these people have some serious they're on spectrum or something. I don't know.
And even better, it wasn't just the speakers. They ended up using a set of audio device plugged into a USB hub. And they pulled the power draw because the USB hub, every time the speaker does its thing, pulls more power from the USB hub, therefore changes the LED on the USB hub.
You would think that those, hardware-wise, those would be not related to each other. Like that?
Nope. I mean,
it's amazing that they are related to each other. Right?
It is amazing that they are related. They are related. Now, obviously, in this particular case, the speaker was better audio fidelity than it once removed from the USB hub.
Wait, I'm going to put a picture of speakers that I think every single one of us had in the Slack channel. What were those called? Is it
Cambridge Soundworks?
What are those? Do you guys see that?
Oh.
Or Harman Kardon.
What were those called?
Oh God! Yeah, everybody had those.
Everyone had those.
Dude, I still have a pair of those in my basement that I used to listen to audiobooks while I'm at my soldering station.
Yeah, what was, I don't remember the brand name, and it's hard to describe in audio what they looked like, but if you saw a picture of these speakers, if you had a computer in the late 90s, early 2000s, you probably had one of those speakers, and one of the commenters was like, yeah, and one was always not working. I totally...
So true.
Dude, I have a pair of those sitting at my soldering station right now. Literally.
I used to have those on my computer.
Was it Cambridge Audio or Harman Kardon or something like that? They're beige, speakers.
Dude, you're getting a Dell. That's all I can say. They came with every Dell system.
Had them.
Yep.
They were so ugly.
Yep.
Oh, God.
But you could totally tell, like, when you were bumping music through these speakers, and they had a subwoofer option to them too, but the power LED would definitely respond as
so my favorite was the Cambridge Soundworks stuff.
It was Harman Kardon. Adrian Sanabria is weighing in. They're Harman Kardon speakers. They're gray. If you saw the picture, you would.
They're also
Alltech Lansing.
Yep.
Alltech Lansing. They're also branded as
Again, my favorite was the Cambridge Soundworks. I actually just threw out electronic recycled my last set of Cambridge Soundworks 7.1 system, and it was a sad day. But
you have a little ceremony?
No way. You can get a pair on Amazon. No, they're not available.
eBay though.
You could eBay those for sure.
Hell, if you want my pair, like, I'll send them to you.
I have to say, being an audiophile, they weren't bad speakers, but what their downfall was the connections between them were just very cheaply made. All of the that connected the left speaker to the right speaker, and even the power source, like all of it was not well put together. It wasn't engineered.
It was like an S video cable too on the one side, so you could never repair that.
It was just the connectors were very cheaply made.
My current favorite at my desk at home, I think they're a pair of Logitechs, and really what it came down to was, like, I have multiple systems in my office. At least 2 of them I need to have audio from, and I want them on a set of speakers so it sounds decent. But then I have 4 speakers at my desk because I have one set for this system and one for, like, I don't have enough desk space for all this stuff. So I found one set of speakers, and I think it's Logitech, and if anybody's interested, just ask me and I'll send you a link to Amazon, that has 2 inputs. Just speakers. Like, I don't need a mixer. I don't need I plug one into one system and I plug one into the other system.
Yeah.
And they sound relatively decent. They were $40 for the set of speakers, and
you know what I did? I recycled all my home stereo theater gear, and I just get stuff connected to a receiver, like with a DAC, simple DAC, and I just connect it to receivers with speaker. That's how I repurposed all all my speakers.
I don't even have a
and receivers, because I had receivers and all different.
Kids changed our living room. Like, we put in the electronics recycling my Sony subwoofer that we had for years. Why? Because the kids stuffed their damn Legos in it.
Yes, that happened to me too with one of my sets as well. I've repurposed all that stuff for my computers though, and I get a DAC and connected. I tell you what, even a cheap receiver with even a cheap pair of speakers sounds better than those Harman and Kardon speakers. Right? Yeah,
probably.
We've got a decent TV, and the audio on the TV sounds okay. Admittedly, now that the kids are a little bit older, I'd love to have like 7.1 surround to be able to go sit down and watch an amazing movie. Maybe.
One
later.
of the things I'm working on, not security related, in a closing note, is if you haven't checked out Rune Labs. Rune makes a really cool software system where you get apps on your devices. You can build Linux systems that act as servers and bridges to stream all of your audio. You can connect it to physical things. It's really cool. It's Linux. It's nerdy. I mean, they want you to buy they basically have a Linux device that they've pre-installed the Linux software on, and it plays all your music, and it's expensive. But if you know Linux, which most of us all of us on the show and most of us listening, we don't work with Linux, you can build your own devices, and they give you the software for free, and it's really cool. And it's not super popular. I gotta also imagine that it's super vulnerable, because when they talk about what distros are supported, they're like, it works on Ubuntu like 15.10, and some people report like 18.04 it works great on. And I'm like, really? That's kind of interesting. But it's really cool stuff.
It's amazing how your priorities change for this type of stuff. When you're thinking about selling your house and moving cross country, like,
you want to get rid of stuff.
What can you actually take with you, and what can you leave behind for the new owners, and what will help your resale value?
Right.
So, like, that's where we are currently.
It's a thing.
Yeah,
it's a thing.
Like, interestingly enough, we were going to be doing a get-together event at Guardians, and we moved it to all virtual, and I canceled my plane tickets. Unfortunately, it wasn't booked refundable, but I have a credit with an airline. And we figured out what we're going to do with that credit, because I'm not going to get reimbursed for it because it's credit with the airline. But we're going to use that later next year to go take a trip and go buy a house. So
there you go.
Awesome.
Yep. Nice. It's, every day we move closer and closer
to the goal.
And closer into the goal. Yep.
$29, Lee. Harman and Kardon computer multimedia speakers.
Yep. And $15 shipping for the eBay version. There is a set available for $10, but there's $30 shipping.
Oof, that's too much.
Ooh,
that's too much. You could find those at a yard sale by you. I guarantee you.
Sure.
Guarantee you. Like, I found some amazing stuff at yard sales recently. Yep. One of those hand drills, the crank ones.
Yeah.
And then I didn't even see it, but they posted back on Facebook like, "Hey, the yard sale's over. If anybody wants this stuff for free, you can come get it." I'm like, They had a bag with 2 bowling balls in it. How did I not buy that?
My wife hates yard sales. Just go off on a tangent for a quick second. Hates yard sales.
Yep.
But when I see yard sales and when with my kids, I'm like, guys, here's what you're looking for. I'm like, tools.
Yep.
Because
antique tools.
And any kind of tools, because you can get them cheap. And even if you use them a few times, you get saw for $1. Perfect. Anything cast iron, because you can restore anything that's made out of cast iron.
Yep.
And vinyl records.
Oh yeah, that's good advice.
Right, when I go to a yard sale, that's what I'm looking for.
I stay away from the vinyl just because there's so much quantity of stuff that is just crap. But you're not wrong with cast iron. You're not wrong with a good portion of tools.
Vinyl you could be a little more picky about too.
Yeah.
And original vinyl is, and usually people don't put that in a yard sale because they recognize the value of it. But like original pressed vinyl, and from the 70s and 80s especially. I've got some stuff I've inherited that's just amazing.
Yeah. For me, you add to that list silverware, utensils.
That doesn't go wrong.
Because
go bad, rather.
Much of that is potentially silver that people don't realize is silver. And some of the tools just in general are of amazing...
Any kind, even power tools too.
I go for the more antique because they're made out of a metal that is an amazing thing for turning into knives.
Yes, that too. Yep.
And some other ones too. Vintage electronics that people like. Oh, I don't want this old radio, and it's a 1930s
old turntables,
big plate radio.
I was explaining in the intro the other day. I'm like, dude, like audio stuff doesn't go bad. Like it really gets better with age. I mean,
you got to do some rehab to it. Old stuff,
but usually speakers, audio gear, headphones, pretty good buys. Recone them, restore them.
Yep. Does anybody recone anymore? I remember that was a thing.
Yeah, still do.
Oh, I'm sure.
I've got a set of headphones that I need to rehab because they're of the same era of the radio that my dad FM radio receiver that my dad assembled from a kit that I listened to the original Star Wars radio dramas on. And it was a built-in to the house that we got to keep when we sold the house. I have the radio. I have a vintage set of headphones that you would have been plugging it in, and I got them at a yard sale for $0.25.
Oh, that's awesome. So I think that will round out the show for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Fall Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Over and yard sales.
Mm-hmm.